All right, so today we're doing a deep dive on something super interesting, the dynamics of love and relationships within the LGBTQ plus community.
Okay.
We're going to be dissecting this thought-provoking podcast episode that really gets into like the nitty-gritty of the challenges and strengths these couples face. You know,
Yeah, I think that's great.
it's something that's often like oversimplified in the mainstream,
Right.
right?
Absolutely.
So I think it's really valuable to kind of unpack those nuances and really get into it.
Yeah, definitely.
And I guess a good place to start would be with the whole societal context, right?
Yeah.
Because it's easy to say love is love,
Hmm.
but the reality is way more complex than that.
Absolutely.
LGBTQ plus couples face all these external pressures that can really impact their relationships.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
So maybe you can speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're talking about like systemic issues, right? Like discrimination. It's often like baked into legal systems and social structures. For instance, did you know that in many parts of the world, LGBTQ plus couples still don't have access to like the same fundamental rights as heterosexual couples?
Yeah.
Things like inheritance, adoption, even just like recognition under the law.
Right, right.
It's a big deal.
It's a huge deal. And it's like easy to forget that sometimes living, where we live.
Yeah,
But it's definitely something to keep in mind as we kind of delve deeper into this.
absolutely.
And on a more personal level, the podcast really highlighted the weight of family acceptance, or sometimes like the lack thereof,
Yeah, that's a big one.
which is, heartbreaking in a lot of ways.
It is. It's really tough because, I mean, think about it. Family is often where we first kind of learn about love and relationships, right?
Yeah.
So it's natural to want that validation from your family.
Of course, you want to share this huge part of yourself with the people you're closest to.
Exactly. But on the flip side, families can also be sources of like really deeply held beliefs and traditions.
Right.
And sometimes those don't exactly align with LGBTQ plus identities.
Yeah.
And that can create such a painful conflict
For sure.
where individuals are kind of forced to choose between being their authentic selves and maintaining those family ties.
That's a lot to carry.
It is. It is. The podcast actually shared a story about this couple who, after years of trying to get their family's approval, decided to just have this small private commitment ceremony.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it kind of broke my heart a little, to be honest.
That's so tough to feel like you have to choose.
Yeah.
It makes the idea of internalized stigma, which I know the podcast also touched on, even more heartbreaking.
Oh, absolutely. Internalized stigma is so insidious,
Yeah.
Because imagine growing up constantly hearing these negative messages about being LGBTQ plus from media, maybe even from your own community.
Right, right.
It's no wonder that some people internalize those messages,
Yeah.
leading to like shame, self-doubt, even self-sabotage within their
Well,
relationships.
it's like carrying this weight, this invisible weight.
Ex-
That impacts how you view yourself and your worthiness of love,
Absolutely. And it can manifest in so many ways, like a fear of intimacy, difficulty trusting your partner, even pushing them away without realizing it.
Wow.
Like, imagine a partner who's hesitant to express their love openly because they've internalized years of hearing it's wrong.
Right.
It creates such a disconnect in the relationship.
Absolutely. And as if those challenges weren't enough, there's also, the ever-present reality of societal discrimination
Oh, yeah, that's huge.
that LGBTQ plus couples have to deal with.
Yeah, and it's not just about like overt acts of prejudice,
Right.
It's the microaggressions, the subtle forms of exclusion, even just the fear of holding your partner's hand in public because you're worried about judgment or harassment.
Yeah.
These things might seem small, but they add up over time.
It's like this constant low-grade stress that
Ex-
just seeps into every aspect of your life,
Yeah, for sure.
including your relationship.
Absolutely. So we've got these external pressures from family, from society, then you add in internalized stigma. It's a lot, right?
It is. It's like, how does any couple, LGBTQ plus or not, survive, let alone thrive amidst all of that?
That's the question, right?
Which leads us to what the podcast really emphasized as a key tool for resilience: communication. The
Community.
cornerstone of any healthy relationship, but especially crucial in the face of adversity, right?
100%.
And it's not just about talking. It's about how you communicate,
Yeah.
especially in these situations.
You're right. You're right. It's about creating a space where both partners feel safe, heard, respected.
Right?
The podcast mentions some really practical tips. For example, using I statements instead of you statements.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, like instead of saying, you always do this, you could say, I feel hurt when this happens.
Right, right.
It helps you take ownership of your emotions without putting your partner on the defensive.
That's such a subtle shift in language, but I can see how it would be so powerful.
Exactly. And that ties into active listening as well, really trying to hear and empathize with your partner's perspective, even if you don't agree with it.
It's about creating that space for vulnerability, right?
Exactly.
Where you can both kind of let your guard down and be there for each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And those moments where couples talked about making time for connection, even amidst the chaos, were really powerful.
Those are so important.
They are. It's like creating these little pockets of joy where you can celebrate your love, recharge, and remember why you chase each other in the first place.
It's about focusing on the positive.
Right.
The love, the shared dreams, not letting the challenges define the relationship.
Exactly. Because even with all the adversity, love can thrive
Yeah.
when you nurture it with care, understanding, and open communication.
It's like a garden, right?
Yeah.
Needs tending, needs watering, needs sunlight, especially when it's surrounded by, harsh conditions.
That's a great analogy.
And speaking of which, the podcast also talked about building a strong support network outside of the relationship, which seems so crucial.
Absolutely. And that support can look like so many things.
Yeah.
Like close friends, chosen family who get it, who offer a listening ear, remind you you're not alone.
Having those people in your corner who've maybe walked a similar path makes a world of difference, I imagine.
It really does. And then there are all the resources available through LGBTQ+ community centers, online forums, support groups. They're amazing.
Yeah. What makes those spaces so impactful, do you think?
I think it's the sense of belonging, the shared experience, the access to information that can be so empowering.
Yeah.
Beacons of hope, you
Yeah.
know, reminding you that you're part of something much bigger than yourself.
Right, exactly. And in a world that can feel so isolating at times, that sense of community can be life-changing.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's about finding your tribe, your chosen family, the people who celebrate you for who you are and offer unwavering support no matter what.
And that's such a powerful thing.
It really is.
It really makes you realize, like, you're not alone in this.
Right.
There's this whole network, this support system out there.
Absolutely.
And speaking of navigating challenges, something that really stuck out to me in this podcast was the emphasis on self-care.
Yes.
Like, not just as a couple, but as individuals, too.
It was so important.
Yeah, and it's easy to forget about yourself, right?
For sure.
When you're so focused on, like, supporting your partner, supporting the relationship itself.
Yeah.
Especially when you're dealing with all these external pressures.
Absolutely. It's easy to kind of like pour from an empty cup, you know?
Right.
You can't water a garden with an empty watering can.
Right, exactly.
You have to replenish your own, well, first.
So it's not selfish, it's essential.
Exactly.
And the podcast mentioned some things like, engaging in activities you enjoy, setting aside time for hobbies, even just taking a walk in nature.
All those things are so good for you.
It's about actively choosing to do things that make you feel good, that bring you joy.
Yeah, 100%. It could be reading, painting, hiking, volunteering, whatever helps you recharge and reconnect with yourself.
Because when you're feeling depleted, it's hard to show up for your partner, for the relationship.
Absolutely. And self-care can also look like setting boundaries, saying no to things, prioritizing your mental and emotional health.
Yeah.
Sometimes it might even involve seeking professional help.
Right. Which, let's be real, can be tricky, especially for LGBTQ plus folks who might not have had the best experiences with therapy in the past.
Yeah, that's true. Finding a therapist who's culturally competent, affirming of LGBTQ plus identities, that's so important.
It is. To have someone to talk to who gets it, who can offer support without judgment.
Exactly. Someone who can help you unpack those internalized beliefs, challenge the negative self-talk.
It's like rewiring those old thought patterns
Yeah, exactly.
that might be holding you back.
Because self-care is really about self-love at its core,
Yeah.
right? Recognizing your worthiness, treating yourself with kindness and compassion.
That's so powerful.
Yeah.
And it makes me think about self-acceptance, which I think the podcast also talked about a bit,
Yes.
and how that plays into all of this.
Oh, huge.
It's not easy, right?
Mhm.
Especially for LGBTQ plus individuals who've often been told they're wrong or less than.
It's a journey, for sure, but it's so liberating when you get there.
What does that look like, that process of self-acceptance?
I think it's about embracing all of yourself, the good, the bad, the messy parts,
Hmm.
and recognizing that you're worthy of love and belonging exactly as you are.
It's like giving yourself permission to exhale,
Yes.
to let go of that shame, that fear that might have been holding you back.
And what's interesting is that the more we embrace self-acceptance, the easier it becomes to have acceptance in our relationships, too.
It makes sense.
It's like this ripple effect.
If you can't fully accept yourself, it's harder to accept that others can truly accept you either.
Yeah.
And that can create insecurities, communication issues, all sorts of problems.
So self-acceptance really is a foundation for healthy relationships.
Yeah, one of the cornerstones for
Yeah.
sure. And, the podcast made a good point about the role of the LGBTQ plus community in all of this.
Oh, for sure.
Like in fostering that sense of self-acceptance,
It's huge.
having that network of people who get it, who've walked a similar path.
Provides so much support and encouragement.
It's like a safe haven, a place where you can be your true self.
Exactly. And especially for those who haven't found that acceptance from their families of origin.
Right, finding that chosen family.
Yes. People who love and support you unconditionally for exactly who you are.
That's amazing. And speaking of shared experiences, the podcast also talked about representation,
So crucial.
like both within the community and in society as a whole.
Absolutely. Because when you rarely see yourself reflected in media and politics and positions of power, it can make you feel invisible.
Like your story doesn't matter.
Exactly. And that's why seeing those positive, authentic portrayals of LGBTQ plus relationships in movies, TV shows, books, it's so important.
Right. It normalizes what has been marginalized for far too long.
100%.
And it's not just about romantic relationships. It's about all aspects of LGBTQ plus life.
Yes. Families, friendships, careers, the struggles, the triumphs, the whole spectrum.
Exactly. Showing the full humanity of the experience.
And that's how we break down stereotypes, challenge prejudice.
Create a more inclusive world for everyone.
It all comes back to visibility.
Mm.
Because what we don't see, we often don't understand.
Right.
And without understanding, it's easy to fall into fear and prejudice.
So it's like, visibility breeds familiarity. Familiarity breeds acceptance. The more we see these stories, the more they become just part of life,
Absolutely. And that's how we chip away at those biases and create a world where everyone feels seen and valued.
Right. It's about recognizing that our differences make us interesting, that our shared humanity unites us, and that love in all its forms is a beautiful thing.
Beautifully said. And, thinking back on this podcast and everything we've talked about today,
Yeah.
I'm struck by the resilience of the human spirit,
Oh, absolutely.
especially within the LGBTQ plus community.
It's inspiring, right? To see that courage, that love, that commitment to being authentic, even when it's hard.
It really is. And it speaks of the power of hope, too.
Yeah.
That belief that things can get better, even when it feels tough.
It's that hope that keeps us going, that fuels the fight for equality, that lets us dream of a better future.
A future where love isn't feared or debated, but celebrated in all its forms.
Yes, a future where everyone, no matter who they love or how they identify, feels safe and accepted and free to be themselves.
It's a future worth fighting for.
100%.
Yeah.
And, it's not just up to the LGBTQ plus community to create that future. It's on all of us.
Couldn't agree more. Allyship is so important.
Yeah.
Using our voices to amplify marginalized voices, to fight injustice, to create a more equal world.
Right. It's about recognizing that silence isn't neutral, that even small acts of kindness matter, and that together we can really make a difference.
We're all in this together, right? We all deserve a world where love is celebrated and everyone is treated with dignity and respect.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself. Well, I think that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the world of LGBTQ plus love and relationships.
This was great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. And to our listeners, we hope this conversation has given you something to think about, maybe challenged your perspectives a bit, and inspired you to approach your own relationships with a little more understanding and compassion.
Here.
Remember, love is a journey, and there's always more to learn, more to explore. So keep those conversations going, and we'll catch you next time.